as by the thumbnail of the video, I think it's Genji. But before you rush to the comments to tell me it's Bastion, let me explain. Let's start off with the most important thing in this video. What does worst actually mean? Well, simply put, it's whoever is closest to having the highest cost for the lowest rewards. If you've watched the 2 previous videos in the series, you'll know what I mean. I'll use an excerpt from my worst ability video to convey this. Think of it as an investment, where say I buy $10,000 worth of Dogecoin and I only get $100 back. Say I made another investment where I buy $20,000 worth of Dogecoin and got $150 back. Even though I have a larger reward in the second investment by $50, it's still technically a worse investment proportional to the larger cost. Just to add on to this further, the top investment is what I would consider to be Bastion, and the bottom investment is what I would consider to be Genji and Doomfist. I made a quick graph here to help visually illustrate this, with Bastion having a medium cost for a low reward, with Doomfist and Genji having high costs for slightly higher rewards. As you can see, I'll have to split hairs between Genji and Doomfist throughout, with Genji having a slightly higher cost for slightly lower rewards. I won't really be speaking about other bad heroes, so to say. Moira is the worst support in the game, but she has her niche. Likewise to Reaper and Junkrat, and with Hog, you'd be surprised at how much he works at high level play, both in ranked and in scrims. Cost was defined into 4 categories, but I will add an extra subcategory as you'll see. The first category was mechanical cost. Does the hero take a lot of mechanics to use? The second category was risk against rewards. How much risk am I taking by playing the hero? Am I constantly putting my life at risk? The subcategory here is for the rewards, being subdivided into coordination. Essentially, does the hero get a higher or lower rewards in a ranked environment or in a scrim/team environment where you have some coordination? The third category is cooldowns or time investments. Time investment basically means how long do you have to wait until you get the rewards. For example, a hero which requires you to hard flank would have a high time investment. The fourth category was resource creation or denial. Can the hero create resources for your team, such as space, or can the hero deny resources from the enemy team? Resources is defined as any aid or advantage you can create or deny, such as damage, healing, utility, space, time, or attention. As usual, let's start off with the mechanical cost. This is solely the reason why I haven't put Bastion as the worst hero in the game. This isn't to say that Bastion has the mechanics of someone like Moira, but it's nothing really special. Genji and Doomfist on the other hand, both have their different challenges. The shurikens with Genji are actually somewhat challenging to hit from medium range, especially when you're playing Genji to solely charge Dragon Blade. A hero like Echo does more consistent poke damage just from her primary fire alone, excluding her abilities. Not to mention, you can also do some swanky tech with your dash and fan combo, but the real mechanics come from Genji's Dragon Blade. You only have to go as far as Necros, Cavalry, or really any top 500 Genji to see how much mechanical skill is required to pull off Dragon Blade. Not to mention, you actually need Nano Boost to make it useful at the higher levels, but regardless. With Doomfist, obviously there's the rollouts, combos, the timing of your engages, and actually landing your follow-up shots. There's also the different punches, being diagonal punches, turn punches, bounce punches, or all 3. His ultimate is obviously no comparison to Dragon Blade, but his base kit I'd say requires more mechanical skill than Genji. However, as I'll get onto later, you don't need to be get quicked on or memorize every rollout in the game to get value out of Doomfist, even at the higher levels. So for that reasoning, I'd say that on average, the mechanical cost of Genji is slightly higher than Doomfist's. Before I end off the mechanics section, here's Spyro and SVB talking about the general skill ceiling of Genji being at least comparable to heroes like Doomfist.
Skill ceiling is like, how difficult is it to play Genji perfectly? And I think with the amount of tech, not quite as much tech as Doomfist, not quite as much aim, as like Tracer, not quite as much game sense as like Sombra, but he's high on all of those categories. And even with the Blade, the ceiling with which you can get with Blade, killing the pharmacies out of the sky, I think there aren't many DPS heroes that have more potential for perfecting than Genji. So I think 3.5.
Again, yeah, Blade might be one factor where you're like, well, Blade, just Blade. But you really have to be very, very disciplined, I think, as Genji, in a way that like some other heroes don't allow. Mm-hmm. Like you really have to know the timings of it. I think 3.5 is fair.
Now let's move on to the risk against rewards. This is where Bastion and Doomfist scored the highest points. The ratio of risk to reward with a hero like Bastion is by far the worst in the game. Aside from niche strategies, like the gameplay you're seeing in the background, which I've used about 1,000 times, there really is no use to Bastion. In ranked at high level play, he's really only used as a meme flanker, which is just countered by a competent Tracer, Bull, Sombra, or all 3 of the marking and scouting flanks. Speaking of being countered, Doomfist is the epitome of that. Doomfist has 2 main counters, space counters, which deny Doomfist from setting up an engage from an off angle, and engage counters, who deny Doomfist when he actually engages. Heroes like Tracer, Bull, Sombra would be considered space counters, whereas Brig, Cassidy, and Torb would be recognized as engage counters. Some do overlap, such as D.Va with her boosters and Matrix, and Torb with his turret. And frankly, just to rub it in, I'll show a clip from Chipsa showing how bad Doomfist really is in ranked.
There's no shadow.
Oh, he's behind us. hate this fucking thing. I just hate it. I just hate it. Oh my fucking god. Fix the fucking game!
However, in coordinated play, it's a whole different story. Doomfist Brawl is by far Doom's most viable composition because the entire Brawl comp has enough sustain to support and follow up when Doomfists engage. Doom Brawl also has a relatively low mechanical skill, and to illustrate this, I'll show a tweet on Lijiang Control Center showing Doomfist literally being a punch bot. All you have to do to play Doom Brawl is to punch from an off angle and have your team W key in. As Temporal explained a year ago though, Doom Brawl doesn't really see that much play due to Mei's wall, so overall, Doom Brawl is a relatively low cost, medium reward composition. The reward of Genji in coordinated comps is frankly limited to Nano Blade and Double Bubble, also known as Cyber Dive, featuring Winston, Zarya, Sombra, Genji, Brig and Ana. You can basically just cycle ultimates, but your neutral game without ultimates is very weak. You actually see less of this comp in pro play, not only because of how important winning neutral is on Koth maps, but also because Nano Blade just isn't that hard to deal with in top level play. Counter diving their backline, using ultimates before the enemy do, stacking CC against the Genji, and a whole array of ultimates can stop Nano Blade in its tracks, which obviously raise the risk of Genji being ran. To finish off this section, here's Sparlow summing up the risk of Genji's kit and comparing it to Doomfist with SVB.
But at the high ranks, Genji struggle against Ashe Coach Gun, they struggle immensely against Echo, they struggle against the new buffed McCree, the 25 HP, that matchup is very unfavorable now. They don't do anything against Mei, they can't do anything against Pharah, they struggle against Reaper comps, Sombra screws them over really hard, Torb is obnoxious because of his overload makes him hard to kill, not to mention Turret constantly poking you out. He has a terrible matchup against Tracer. There aren't many heroes that he does well or, neutral on. So I think value ceiling is also too. Like, you see some crazy Genjis out there and they will still find a way. I would rather one-trick Genji than one-trick Doomfist, right?
Just wanted to quickly interject here. If we're talking about ranked purely alone, sure, I would say Genji's reward is slightly better than Doomfist's, but as soon as we go into any form of coordination, Doomfist's value becomes significantly better. I'd rather play Doomfist Brawl than Genji Cyber Dive any day of the week. Genji Cyber Dive loses to any form of brawl, it loses to dive on the neutral matchup, it loses to double shield with Torb Casti Brig Bap, and it loses to the Bull's End Poke Dive comp. And even in ranked, as long as there are a few people planning against Nanoblade, it's really not much more than what Doomfist can do, especially considering some of his wacky rollouts.
Yeah, exactly. I think with Doom being 1.5, there's an argument for Genji to be 2. Yeah, there's at least the Blade, right?
Yes.
It's one of those, why would you?
Yeah.
Why would you play Genji when you could play Echo or Ashe or any other of the sort of stronger DPS?
Now let's move on to the third category of cooldowns and time investment. Genji obviously has longer cooldowns than Doomfist, but his time investment is also significantly higher. Since the majority of your value lays on nanoblades, you'll have to wait between 1 or 2 minutes to farm your blade at best. In comparison, most Doomfist rollouts take a few seconds to execute, if not slightly longer. His high mobility also allows him to hard flank quickly, reducing his time investment, and even in Doom Brawl, there is a very low time investment. Before I move on, I'll briefly cover Bastion, who has a relatively high time investment, considering that flanking, and hard flanking in particular, is going to be his primary playstyle, which takes a lot of time to pull off correctly, especially considering his lack of mobility. Lastly, moving on to space creation and denial. Bastion can actually create quite a bit of space, utilising the fact that the enemy team will be focused on tracking him down and killing him, which his team can use to their advantage. However, that's about as far as it goes, and the space creation is not often capitalised on, as Bastion ends up dying too quickly. Think of it like a Reinhardt pinning into the enemy team. Sure, he creates space so to say, but he'll probably die if his team aren't pushing in with him. Doomfist is also a similar case, but unlike Bastion or Reinhardt pinning, he can actually get out alive, especially in Doomfist Brawl. Here's a clip from that Temporal video, describing how Doomfist functions in Brawl and the space he creates that allow his entire team to push up with him.
The Doomfist Brawl comp wants to engage in such a way that their Doomfist and their core push revivals at the same time. Okay, this right here is the committal from Speedily, and they've layered their committal from Speedily. This is their proper aggression window for American Tornado, and they're strengthening their aggression window with Beat. So Speedily is going in, Beat is happening, and if we turned around, we would see that the front line of American Tornado is pushing in hard. So this is correct initiation from American Tornado with their Doomfist Brawl.
Genji can also create some space and control some areas of the map, but as mentioned prior, anything he can do, Echo can do more efficiently. Here's Sparlow giving an example of the high ground that Genji can control, but keep Echo in the back of your mind whilst watching this.
You're going to wall climb up, and you're going to throw shurikens, and you're going to poke them out, because you have better poke than they do. And even if the monkey walks into you, you're still going to be like, okay, well, I can just walk away a little bit. I'm going to force bubble. I'm going to force matrix. I'm not going to let you take this high ground at a range that's actually favorable to me and let you do anything about it. And guess what, chat? You'll win. This isn't just about farming Blade. You will win. You will force either bubble or matrix or jump, or you'll force a ton of healing. You will win this duel. And you'll build Blade as a side benefit. And what you have done is not only have you put pressure and forced healing and resources, you will make them either screw off the high ground or make them expend more money to try and hold it. More cooldowns. And if you force them off of high ground, guess what? You've done your Reinhardt a huge favor.
There's obviously Nanoblade as well, but with the 3 prior cost categories of mechanics, risk and time investment being so high, alongside being unable to evaluate Blade on its own, separate from the Nano Boost, the space creation Nanoblade makes to win a single team fight isn't really worth it. In conclusion, Genji's mechanics and skill ceiling are comparable to Doomfist, but the cost of Nanoblade in terms of time investment and risk is simply too high compared to a hero like Doomfist, who is more viable and consistent in coordinated play than Genji. Bastion does have the lowest reward in the game, but my definition of worst factors in the cost as well. Let me know your thoughts down below, and until next time.